Are we on? Are we live? Right, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this meeting of Planning and Highways Committee. Before we move to the formal business, for the benefit of those joining online, I am Councillor Sandra Pickin. I am the Chair of the Planning and Highways Committee. I am also joined at today's meeting by the Deputy Chair, Councillor Stuart Eptinstall, and other committee members, which are Councillors Blizzard, Ellis, Harvey, Hepworth, Jones, Scott, Swift, Taylor, Tennantking and Whitehouse. The committee also has support at today's meeting from Kevin Winter, our planning solicitor, together with Ian Pollard, our planning service manager, a number of other officers from the Planning and Highways section who we will introduce the applications before us today. First one will be John Holmes, who was a senior planning officer, and item 2 will be Ian Garrett, a team leader. Before we move on to the formal agenda items, I'd just like to confirm today's meeting procedures. We will take each item on the agenda. In order, copies of which have been provided to members and also is available on the council website. I would remind colleagues alongside those registered to speak who are participating in today's meeting to ensure that your microphone is on mute throughout the meeting unless you are invited to speak, to minimise the potential of background noise disrupting the meeting broadcast. Also, your video will be off until you are speaking. When you come to speak, you can put your video on and we'll discuss later. In accordance with council meeting procedure rules, my ruling as chair during debate will be final. When invited to speak, members of the committee, I've already done that one, I will invite any colleague wishing to comment on the reports or ask questions to do so at the appropriate points in the meeting. And all members should now be familiar with the procedures in place to indicate they wish to ask a question on the matters before us. At the end of the debate on the planning applications, I will call for a vote to be undertaken. In order for all parties to be clear as to how the vote has gone, I will invite the committee officer, Frances, to undertake a roll call. The committee officer will ask each member by name to confirm their vote. This will be achieved by members turning on their microphones and video and stating clearly for, against or abstain. The committee officer will summarise the result at the end of the roll call. If everyone is happy, then I shall proceed with our formal business. Agenda item 1 is Chair's announcements, and I would remind everyone that this meeting of the Planning and Highways Committee are not public meetings. They are, however, council meetings held in public, and only those registered to speak will be allowed to do so at the allotted time. During the course of the meeting, it may be necessary to adjourn for a short period, and if this is needed, then I will indicate this clearly to the committee, and if required, request that we pause the broadcast during the adjournment. As we have no urgent items before us today, I will move on to agenda item 3. Do any members have any interest to verbally declare in the matters before us?
Chair,
Councillor Blizzard.
if I could just say that agenda item 6.2 is in my ward, but I've had no dealings with it. But I'm also part of the Welbeck Liaison Committee, but we haven't had any meetings or anything to do with it, so I'll stay in and I'll be able to vote on this. Is that okay?
That's okay, Councillor.
Chair, Stuart.
Councillor Eptinstall.
I'm a member of the Welbeck Liaison Committee that meets at on the Welbeck site. I haven't been to a meeting for over 12 months.
Yeah. Okay, Councillor. Councillor Hepworth.
I'm also a member of the Welbeck Committee, but I haven't attended any meetings due to my work commitments. But I am a member if asked.
Okay, Councillor Hepworth. Is that okay, Kevin Winter?
Yes, that's fine. Yeah, because obviously they haven't discussed this this actual planning application, so I think it's reasonable for members of that Welbeck committee to participate in this debate and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 4 is to receive apologies for absence. Can I ask Frances if there are any apologies?
Hi Chair, I've apologies from Councillor Saunders and Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Move them, Chair.
Second them, Chair.
And I'll take silence as all in favour. Thank you, and that is carried. Agenda item 6 is to consider planning applications brought before us today. We have 2. I will outline the procedures as followed. Firstly, the planning officer will be invited to present the application. Secondly, the registered speakers will then be invited to speak one at a time. I would be grateful to speakers if they confirm for the benefit of the committee if they are speaking against or for the application. Members of the committee will be invited to ask registered speakers any questions if they need to clarify any points raised. Any local ward member who has registered to speak on the application will be invited to do so. 5, the committee will then be invited to ask the local member any questions if they need to clarify any points raised. 6, should the need arise, I will seek any points of clarification from the presenting officer or legal advisor. 7, the committee will then be invited to debate the application, and as necessary, I will invite the planning officer to respond to any points raised during the discussion. The matter will then be taken to the vote. I will now ask John Holmes to undertake the first presentation. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen, which should show you the presentation. Can everyone see that? Can everyone see the presentation?
We'll take silence as a yes, John.
Thank you. Okay, so this application that members have been asked to consider is an application for the removal and demolition of a portable building, an advertisement hoarding, and the construction of a building to be used for car repair, external car sales and hand car wash, including creation of a new access at land adjacent to Colorado Way in Castleford. The site is within a special policy area, SPA 5, which seeks to develop land for leisure or employment uses. The proposal would comprise a mixed use of the site and would be classed as sui generis. However, the nature of the proposed uses are considered to constitute an employment use of the site. Now, this location plan shows the wider area, and there's a mix of uses in the site. The land to the east here is currently vacant land that's undeveloped, with dwellings beyond in this area and also down to the south of the site here. To the west of the site is Colorado Way and a number of units which are in B2 and B8 uses, which is general industry or storage and distribution. To the north of the site, there's 2 buildings. There's one here and then one further to the north. Both of those are in use as restaurants or public house. And then this land to the west of the site here is currently undeveloped, but it does have planning permission to be used as a car auctioneer's. So this site plan shows greater detail over what's proposed. The building is to the north of the site, or the northern part of the site. A new access would be created here using the existing site access, and then a new access would be created to the bottom half of the site and would allow for vehicles to come in at this point, move through the site and then leave at this point. This is the area where the car wash is proposed, and then there are parking areas here which would be used for car sales or staff parking. And this plan also shows the existing closest dwelling to the site, which is here. So this slide shows the elevations which are proposed. This would face Colorado Way, this road elevation, and this front elevation would face into the site. This rear elevation would face the restaurant to the north of the site. Sorry, this rear elevation would face land to the east that's currently vacant, and this, which is called side elevation, would face the restaurant to the rear of the site. So this shows the floor plan of the proposed building. It shows that there'd be an MOT bay in there, and then there'd also be an area of car storage, and staff facilities would be to this part of the building. So this shows the site as it currently is. It's been used for offices and a bit of a compound for Waystone, who've developed a much wider land parcel in the area. You can see a number of portable buildings are on the site, as well as a storage container. And this shows the site at distance from the south. It shows the nearest dwelling here in photo 4. And it also shows the advertisement hoarding that's around the site. That would be removed as part of the development, as well as all the other buildings that are on the site now. And that just shows it a little bit closer up, the nearest residential property. And finally, this is an aerial photo which shows those surrounding uses that I described earlier, this vacant area of land, the restaurant to the north, and then the units and dwellings nearby as well. 43 letters of objection have been received, and these are detailed in the case officer's report. In summary, the objections raise concern regarding noise, odour and disturbance affecting the amenity of nearby residents, the impact of the development upon access and highway safety, overlooking and overshadowing caused by the development, the visual impact of the proposal, and disposal of waste and impact upon air quality. 3 letters of support have been received, raising the considerations that the proposal would provide employment opportunities, other legislation would control waste storage, and the proposal is not considered to cause significant issues providing measures are in place. The proposed development is considered to be acceptable in principle. The Council's land quality team, environmental health team and highways team raised no objection to the proposal, subject to conditions. The police architectural liaison officer, Yorkshire Water and West Yorkshire Archaeology also raised no objection to the scheme. Within SPA 5, there is a key policy objective to provide employment and skills development opportunities for local residents, and the proposal is considered to contribute to meeting this objective. Having regard to the consultee responses and the representations of third parties, the proposal is considered to be acceptable with regard to the impact it would have upon drainage and flood risk, land quality, air quality, land stability, visual amenity, archaeology, access and highway safety, amenity, ecology, safety and security, and climate change, as detailed within the case officer report. Conditions are recommended restricting the use to that as applied for, and also that the car repair and hand car wash only operates between 8 and 6 Monday to Friday and 9 and 4 Saturday, Sunday and bank holidays. The car sales would be restricted to 7:30 and 7 Monday to Friday and 8 and 5 Saturday, Sunday and bank holidays. Conditions requiring no car repair to be undertaken externally, that no external storage over 1 metre in height is undertaken, and that no sound amplification equipment is used are also recommended. Conditions requiring submission of details of drainage arrangements and measures to ensure no unacceptable level of contamination are recommended, as well as conditions requiring written approval for details of the materials, finished floor levels, boundary treatments and landscaping. Details of noise, spray and odour control measures are recommended to be submitted for written approval before the use commences. It is considered that on the basis of the inclusion of the conditions as detailed within the case officer report, having regard to the submitted detail, responses of consultees, and the content of third-party representations, the proposal is acceptable. Conditional approval of planning permission is therefore recommended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. We have two speakers registered. Mrs. Wendy McLaughlin.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, my name's Wendy. I can't turn my video on because you've stopped it. But I reside in the house.
Just hold on a minute, Wendy. We're just going to ask you to redo it. Can you do it now? Can you start it now, Wendy?
Yes.
There you go. Wendy, you've got 3 minutes, and I'll remind you when you get to 30 seconds to wind up, if that's okay. So
That's
when you're ready.
fine. Yep, so I own the house adjacent to the site. So previous planning decisions, so the existing buildings for which temporary permission was granted to Waystones are now in breach of their planning permission, condition 1 of the particulars of the decision, reference 14/00095. This stated that the building and the hard standards should be permanently removed from the site and the land returned to its former condition, of which we've been promised on numerous occasions from council meetings. This should have been completed within 1 month after the permission expiring on the 12th of March 2020. Out of character, the site is between a residential housing estate and restaurants, so I consider the proposed business development to be out of character with its surrounding in both the use, scale, design, appearance and materials. Highway safety, the residents of the estate are already greatly affected by the traffic volume around junction 32. We're forced to go up that way on bank holidays and weekends, as you can't go out the other way. Can I draw your attention to the highway report, which did say they have concerns. However, this was assessed during the first lockdown whilst junction 32, Escape and all the eateries were actually closed. Environmentally, we already have inadequate sewage systems which regularly get blocked when the restaurants are open, but also overflow during normal heavy rains and would be unable to cope with the proposed industrial business. Pollution not only from car exhaust fumes, but from the chemical runoff into the water table. In addition, the increased air pollution from detritus and chemicals being made airborne from jet washing of all cars all day, every day. PPG 24 states that local planning authorities must ensure the development does not cause an unacceptable degree of disturbance. Installation of a MOT station servicing up to 7.5 tonne wagons, which is very large, up to the boundary of my fence, utilising air compression tools, means I will no longer be able to utilise my garden nor open my patio doors to my garden due to unacceptable level of disturbance. The granting of planning permission does not remove the need to comply with other statutory controls. For example, the statutory nuisance provisions of the Environmental Protection Act 1990. PPG 24 also refers to the use of BS 4142 1997 where appropriate to consider noise from industrial and commercial developments. And finally, the moral being the applicant has already shown, even prior to permission being granted, his intentions to consider anything or no one else and nil. The blocking of the pedestrian pathways, putting adults and children at risk, even after being asked to unblock the pathways and having the space within his own land to unblock the pathways, it didn't comply.
30 seconds.
So we've videoed the applicant and his wife clearing the site of rubbish straight over onto the land which was shown, which is somebody else's land, obviously negating the cost of a skip or rubbish removal. Each Sunday up to last Sunday when it was heavy with snow, starting work at 8 AM in the morning from cement mixers and other large equipment, obviously going ahead with the change in the site already, is very intrusive, and the proposal would grant them permission during the week to open at 7 AM daily. And I do feel if the applicant had any intention to consider the residents, The plan may have put the office buildings closest to the residential area, but I presume the cheapest option is to use the other end of the site where already has drainage, etc., etc. I feel we've not been considered, and the inconvenience and danger to the local area when we don't have, we've got plenty of hand car washes, we've got plenty of garages.
Can I ask you to wind up now, please?
Yes, and that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you just wait out, councillors, are there any questions, Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes, Chair, could I ask a question? I just can't get my hand up quick enough yet.
Yeah, Councillor Blizzard.
Mrs. McLaughlin, have you been consulted at all by the council, the officers, or anybody from Waystone?
No, not at all. At no point. Years ago, when it was first changed from grassland, we went on holiday, fortnight's holiday, and came back, and the buildings that you see there now were erected within a fortnight's holiday without any consultation. When we questioned, they said that's when we were told it was it's temporary, and they'd only been granted 3 years. They were then granted a second 3 years, and at that point we were guaranteed at the end of that 3 years it would be removed and put back to its current state.
And nobody's been in touch with you since or told you anything?
Nobody whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Swift.
I wonder if you could expand a little on the comments that you made about drainage problems. You said that during periods of heavy rain, the site didn't drain satisfactorily, and I think possibly some other comments about drainage.
Yes, it's not in the site, it's actually on Colorado Way, the road itself. So if you looked yesterday, the buildup of water goes almost to the centre of the road for the drainage, and that's when the restaurants are shut. You'd probably be able to look from records when the restaurants are actually open, and I presume from waste going down the sewers, very, very regular. The road is half closed off while the drains have to be unblocked. Obviously at the moment, nothing's open, but it still floods into the roadway.
I've got a second question. You commented about a pathway being obstructed, and I think there's reference to that in the list of representations as well. I know it's rather difficult. Could you explain where that path is?
The path is down the side in front of the development, down the side. It's where the pedestrians have to walk, that path, yes.
It's the footpath, sorry.
Yes, it is the footpath, and it's the only footpath up that road. And the gentleman that's put the proposal forward has that blocked on occasions with vehicles, etc. When you've seen the picture of the land, there's plenty of area to put all his vehicles he wants inside, but when he's having deliveries, etc., for some reason he seems to block the pathway. And I just pointed that out because obviously prior to opening anything there, that gives us an indication of the consideration he will give.
Okay. So is the applicant conducting an existing business down there? I'm a bit unclear.
The applicant made himself known to us whilst he was walking his dog, and he has a large amount of taxis, so he's storing them there at the moment. He didn't know we lived in the house that you keep showing, the nearest property, and he's keeping taxis there currently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Wendy, could I just ask you, how would you be able to explain to us that the artificial lighting on the site will affect the residents' sleep? Thank you.
Yeah, it's got a large floodlight, and about 6 weeks ago, he's erected 6 CCTV cameras. 3 of them face away from my building, and 3 of them, one in particular, faces directly at my house, and because it's raised, when if I open my blind, and I have to have blackout blinds and curtains in my rear bedroom of where my master bedroom is, the camera looks directly into my windows, which again I feel's an absolute intrusion. If somebody was going to be considerate, they could just put the cameras on facing away from the residential properties. He's put them there since he's put his taxes in. Obviously, I understand people want to keep their property secure, but having 3 cameras looking directly into my bedroom windows is really intrusive.
Thank
And
you.
anybody's welcome to come and have a look with pleasure.
Any further questions to Mr. McLaughlin? No? And thank Councillor Scott.
Can you hear me? Mrs. McLaughlin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sorry.
You've mentioned about the traffic, and it was assessed last year during lockdown. Is the traffic a lot worse?
Absolutely. When we're not in lockdown, Escape is open, and Junction 32 is open, and all the restaurants are open. And if it's tea time, you can't get. So I work up the A1, and my normal route would be to jump on the 62 and go up the A1. And I have to work weekends. So when I leave on a weekend, I have to go up Colorado Way and through Castleford to actually get out up to the A1. That's been common. We've owned the property since it's been built, almost 20 years. And obviously over the last 5 years, this has been a problem, but we utilise Colorado Way to get out and get access to the motorways. The other time, and which happens, if there's any work being done on the M62, it's a very easy diversion. So all the wagons all day and all night will come out and use Colorado Way and jump off at 32 and get back on 31. So it's massively congested anyway. But all the observations of all the official bodies have been made during lockdown when these aren't there. So I don't feel they represent the situation at all.
Thank you. And also you mentioned about the gentleman throwing fly tipping over rubbish. Has this been reported? Did you report this to the council? Did you report it to your local councillors when this happened? And have you shown them the video?
No, I haven't shown them the video. I have sent some photographs. As you may be aware, there were 6 silver birch trees planted quite just in front of where the hand is on the picture there now. So they've all been sawn down, and then they're thrown over the back where the other side, the land I believe belongs to somebody else, but they spent a whole Sunday picking up all the rubble and all the rubbish. They've actually knocked down the whole wall at the back at the moment, and the picture that you've been shown doesn't represent what it looks like now, because they've actually built another wall the whole length of the back. But they waited till they'd cleared all that land and all the rubbish onto the land behind it, and then they've built a wall.
Thank you. And also, you mentioned the camera looking straight into your bedroom. Have you reported that?
I wouldn't actually, unfortunately, and I don't mean it wrongly, I'm quite naive of these sort of situations, and I wouldn't really know where to. I've thought about reporting it to the police, but I don't really understand where to report it.
Yeah, I think you need to report that. Report it. Sorry,
who could I report it to? Because I'd like them to come have a look.
Well, you could report it initially to your local councillors, but you could also report it to your local police.
Thank you. Thank you for your help.
Any further questions from any councillor? No? Then thank you, Mrs. McLaughlin.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Our next speaker is Councillor Richard Forster. Are you there, Richard?
I am, Chair.
Thank you. As I say, Richard, you've got 3 minutes, and we'll remind you when you get to 30 seconds. So when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am speaking against this application, and Wendy has covered many of the parts, but I'd like to reiterate it. It's my view, and that view of many of the residents who live close to this is an inappropriate use of this land. Following the exit of Waystone, it's always been the understanding that this would have been returned to grassed amenity land. This application will seriously affect the lives of residents who live adjacent to it, both visually and with regard to noise. I think one of the other things that really does concern me, and Wendy's touched on it, is the level of traffic. Residents who have contacted me about this application have drawn my attention to when the traffic survey was done. I think it was May, June in the middle of last year, because some went and actually spoke to them. Now, clearly, at that point, traffic levels on Colorado Way and other surrounding roads were negligible compared to pre-pandemic and no doubt future post-pandemic levels. Consideration has also to be taken that a large car auction is currently under construction on Thunderhead Ridge and another site, which you can see on the map, which is just going to exacerbate traffic levels in that area. One of the other concerns that's been raised, and I have personal experience of this, the entrance to this proposed garage and car wash is no more than probably 100, 150 metres away from the entrance to the car park of Birchwood Farm and Eastern Court. That's a busy junction, and as Wendy's just pointed out, particularly when the restaurants are open, tea times, mostly through the day, whenever you go, you've difficulty accessing Colorado Way from there anyway. So adding another junction less than 150 yards away will create more difficulties. One of the other things that's got to be taken account of is, you can see very clearly from the picture that's on the screen now, the junction at the Asda roundabout at the top left of the picture, when cars are coming straight from Leeds Road onto Colorado Way, it's a busy junction, is that. So really, that does cause concern. And as Wendy's explained far better than I can, the level of traffic, noise, pollution on that area is phenomenal. They also mentioned that Wendy's drawn attention to the land to the east of this proposed development.
30 seconds, Councillor.
Thank you. It's been my understanding that application to use that land was refused probably in about 2010 because they wouldn't allow them access onto Colorado Way. And drawing that to the point, I just think by allowing this application, another amenity, albeit quite small in relation to the site overall, will be lost. And I would ask members to refuse this application on loss of amenity ground. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions to Councillor Forster? Councillor Blizzard.
Thank you, Chair. Just going on what Councillor Foster's just said about the piece of land behind. So are you telling me that that piece of land's landlocked? And if I just ask you a few questions and then you can tell me. And is the piece of land that's wanting to be this car wash come MOT centre, if he owns the land, is it in the local development framework plan for development? Is it for houses? Is it for industry, business? I just wondered if you knew that, Richard.
Right, thanks, Councillor Blizzard. If we look at it, the piece of land that's immediately to the east of it, what we've been having a lot of trouble with is fly tipping on that land. So it's come to light that the gentleman that owns it is now effectively got a landlocked piece of land because the area of the proposed development, because it were all grassed area up to Waystone putting the offices on it. I'm told, although we couldn't get any evidence for it, that when they wanted to develop it for housing, to link into the housing development where Mrs. McLaughlin lives, it was refused because they wouldn't allow another access onto Colorado Way so close to the junction for Birchwood Farm and Eastern Court. Now, this is hearsay from a number of the residents who were involved in the development of the regeneration of Glasshoughton, who live in some of the terrace properties that were all part of the consultation exercise.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Richard. The access is going to be moved, and the traffic on Colorado Way will, I'm assuming, get busier. How busy is that road when there's no lockdown?
I live on Barnes Road, which is pretty close to this site, and obviously we visit Junction 32 Escape quite regularly, and when you can actually see where the actual development starts, there's white lining on there. You can actually have traffic queuing well past there, and sometimes to the bus lay-by. But what you've also got to think about, while traffic is queuing that way, up towards the roundabout, traffic will also be queuing on Thunder Ridge Way, which is the road to the lower part of the screen. So in that area, and like Wendy's eloquently said, it's just jams up at that roundabout, and to actually have more access joining this, it'll make the flow of traffic even more difficult.
Thank you. I will be asking the officer if there's any information around a planning application from 2010, because you're saying you've got no proof, but they should have proof with the planning officer. Is that right?
I would imagine so. I know when we actually dealt with the complaints of the fly tipping, the owner of the land, I think, lives somewhere down in the Midlands, so we're able to establish. But as I say, that was one of the main reasons for that land to the east of it not being developed.
Thank you, Richard.
Councillor Hepworth.
Thank you, Chair. Richard, what concerns me is the work that's been carried out on this piece of land prior to any authorisation given to it. And you've half answered it with planning permission, with the fly tipping. And you said that, you know, there has been instances of fly tipping. Then again, look at intrusion by cameras to this lady's house. Were you aware of that, Richard?
No, I wasn't aware until Wendy mentioned it about the intrusion of the cameras, but I have already reported, following complaints from other residents, about amount of building material that were delivered onto the site before Christmas when this first application came to light. So I've already reported that, and I was informed that the work that were being done were just an amount of, they were allowed to have materials delivered onto site. But I visited the site yesterday, and the picture that members have seen with the Waystone hoardings on, they've all gone now. They've been replaced by plain boards and the sites, and there were actually heavy cranes on the site removing the Waystone buildings. And that was yesterday.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Is there any further questions to Councillor Foster? No, then thank you, Councillor Foster.
Chair, would you like me to exit the meeting now?
You can wait until we've done the questions to officers if you want to, then you can exit.
It's up to you, Chair. I will leave when you feel it appropriate.
You're fine. You're fine. You can wait until all questions have been answered to officers, but when I come to go to the vote, then I will ask you to leave.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Hepworth, have you got your hand up?
No, Chair, it must be the delay. I've got my hand on lowered.
All right, thank you. Councillor Harvey, have you put your hand up for a question?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, a little bit delay. Yes, I have a few questions actually. First one, John, I wonder that the number of objections heavily outweigh the number of support.
Can I stop you a minute, Councillor Harvey? Is that questions to Councillor Foster?
No, sorry, Chair. I thought Councillor Foster was trying to say that he finished his. Yeah, sorry. This is for John. Sorry.
Right then. Right. With no more questions for Councillor Foster, then I will ask Councillor Holmes to. John Holmes to answer questions now. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. So it's the issue I'm having is the objection heavily outweigh the number of support. Just to echo the comments, some of them raised in the letter of objection. Why has work started already on the site with Wendy has mentioned about the floodlights before the planning permission has been granted? Thank you.
Hi, Councillor Harvey. Yeah, in terms of the works that have started at site initially, and I think Councillor Forster touched on this in what he was saying earlier, initially what was being undertaken at site wasn't significant works that you would need planning permission for, as such as storage of building materials. But by the sounds of things, there's been quite a bit more development undertaken which does need permission, and that is a planning enforcement issue when works are undertaken which need planning permission don't have the permission in place. They're doing the works at their own risk, essentially. Even if they are implementing what they're applying for planning permission for, they don't have permission, and equally the conditions that are recommended require them to provide a lot more detail to us on a number of issues for us to agree in writing with them before they do start the development. Essentially, it becomes a planning enforcement issue. I mean, if you were to grant planning permission today, that would still mean that they had conditions that they had to address, and they would have time to do that, and we could speak to them from a planning enforcement perspective about ceasing works until they discharge the conditions. It's an issue which does occur quite a bit in the planning system. It's not illegal to undertake works without planning permission, even if they are works which do need planning permission. It's simply done at the applicant's risk of enforcement action, which I would think they are aware of that risk, and they'll probably be contacted shortly by our enforcement team, given that there's been further developments at the site. Thank you.
Councillor Swift.
Yes, Chair. 2 or 3 questions to John. The first one relates to the restoration conditions on the previous development. Now, the resident who spoke said that those conditions kind of should have come in roughly 12 months ago. I wonder, first of all, if John could confirm whether that's correct, and secondly, whether there had been any action taken at all to actually secure the implementation of the restoration condition.
It is correct. The permission for Waystone to use that site was temporary, and there was a condition that required them to restore the land to the condition it was in before they implemented the temporary buildings that are on, or portable buildings that are on the site, and then as well as the hard standing. This planning application that's in front of us today that we're considering, that was submitted roughly around the time that a scheme was required to be submitted to us to regularise or to restore the land. So essentially, as there was a planning application in place looking to get a new use of the land, it was considered unreasonable of us to insist that they comply with that condition and restore the land to grassland when they're asking the council if they can reuse it and redevelop it for another use. It would have not really served any real purpose to got them to adhere to that condition if they were then subsequently going to redevelop the land for what's been proposed today. I suppose it would become a planning enforcement matter if they were not to gain planning permission today, and that would be, like I say, as with the previous issue raised by Councillor Harvey, the fact that they've done some works on site without planning permission. That would be all sort of bundled together, if you like, as part of one enforcement case that would be investigated by our enforcement team in the event of any refusal.
Yeah, the resident said that local residents had actually received assurances from the council over a period of time, repeated assurances that the site would in fact be restored in accordance with the conditions. Is that something you're able to confirm?
I don't know about the specifics of that claim about assurances. I suppose any questions that were raised to council officers that came in before this planning application was submitted, which we're asking how's it going to be treated at the end of the temporary period, would have been answered with the fact that there's a condition on that was seeking to restore it. As with many planning applications, circumstances change over time, and that's kind of what's happened here. Is, you know, that we can only answer a question on the basis of the facts that are in front of us, and presumably when residents were asking what was going to happen prior to this planning application, that the answer would have been it's going to need to be restored to its previous state. So I would assume that council officers have answered questions for residents to that effect, but like I say, circumstances change. That the applicant or the landowner has the right to apply to redevelop land, and that's been a bit of a change in circumstances in this case, which has led to, you know, this application that's in front of us today.
And finally, Chair, Councillor Forster raised concerns over the future of the piece of land to the east. How would you envisage the future of that piece of land, and does the development of the application site prejudice the proper development of the land to the east?
Well, I've just been informed that outline consent was granted in 2007 for a residential development of 19 dwellings on that land to the east, and access would have been taken from Colorado Way. Sorry, that wasn't 2007, it's 2010. Ultimately, the fact that there's two parcels of land next to one another, and this applicant essentially could be argued to have a ransom strip between Colorado Way and that land to the east. Looking at the aerial photo, there also appears to be other ways to access the land to the east. There looks to be a highway here where it could be accessed, and there's also an area here. Now, this is a situation which quite often arises, where you can have a piece of land where there are, well, in this case, there looks to be 3 access points which could be taken to this land. And presumably there's a ransom strip across this access to the south, this one to the northeast, and this area here, which means that the landowner of this land to the east needs to come to a formal sort of legal agreement about opening it up for development. I don't think it's a piece of land that's of such size and significance that we could reasonably insist on any sort of measures like a compulsory purchase of a land strip, of a ransom strip, to unlock its development potential. It is an area of land within an urban area. It's I believe it's unallocated within the within the LDF. So it's development for a number of uses. There's definitely potential there. But I don't think that we could reasonably refuse permission for this application on the idea that it would prejudice development of land to the east, given there's other options for access to that land to the east, and the fact that the two landowners could speak to one another and come to an agreement where they develop the whole land as one large parcel, and that, you know, we can only assess what's in front of us and what the applications come in front of us on the day, essentially. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree, but it answers my question. Yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wezard.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of questions for you, John. Could you first tell me what that grey building is at side of the boundary line, the red line?
This one here?
No, beyond the boundary, there. Yeah.
The one to the north, this?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a restaurant. That's called Eastern Courts, I think.
Right. I know what you mean now. So the car park at the back is where all them cars are. On my map, it looks like all there where you are. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that appears to be some sort of general industrial use or storage and distribution use of the land.
Right.
But
I'm just trying to get a better picture of it, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that appears to be some sort of some sort of storage or parking area. And then obviously we've got dwellings here and then also down here.
Yeah. And is that where the lady lives, on that where your hand is now?
Yeah, she advised she was in the nearest residential property, which this is the photograph which shows the site here and the nearest property, which you can also see. It's down here.
Just while you're on that picture then, John, that picture you've just been on.
Yep.
Yeah, that one. So that's the lady's house, and I can see where her back garden would be with the fencing that's there.
Yeah.
And that's the start of where the development wants to be, where it says Waystone. Is it beyond that?
It's basically two corners. Apologies. There's a announcement about a fire alarm test. So if you can hear that in the background, that's what that was. Yeah, essentially, this probably shows it better. The bottom corner of the application site, the southeastern corner, is basically right adjacent to the northwestern corner of this property's boundary here.
Yeah.
And that's addressed in the report as being subject, and these boundaries here at the south and the east are addressed in the report as been needed to be subject to some sort of significant boundary treatment, such as a close bordered fence or a wall, which would provide a level of attenuation for sound, would prevent sound spilling out, and then also prevent other disturbance or nuisance in terms of overspray from the car wash use. There's a condition on there that a scheme about controlling overspray would need to be submitted.
Right, John. I'm just trying to get it in my head now. We've been told about the privacy and everything, where the cameras would have been to look into this lady's bedroom, into her back garden.
Yeah.
And looking at that, it doesn't look like it could be.
Well, in terms of the placement of cameras, I mean, it depends how they've been installed. If they're but I would have thought that the installation of a CCTV camera on a pole would constitute something that needs planning permission. We recommended a condition requiring a scheme of artificial lighting to be submitted to the as part of the scheme, and that would form part of the conditions. In terms of installing a CCTV camera, you don't need planning permission to put it on a building or onto a lighting column that's already in place. But if you have to build a structure to put the camera on, then that that means it needs permission. So I think what's there already may need planning permission, could probably be looked at and investigated as part of an enforcement case. But equally, I think it's something that we can control if we are getting artificial lighting, a scheme of artificial lighting. We can add in that we need a scheme of CCTV to be provided as well.
Yeah, make that a condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason we can't do that, given that some appears to have been installed on the site already. There is separate legislation which controls how CCTV which you install is used. It's not meant to look onto private land or land outside the ownership of the person who's installing it. So that there is separate legislation in place as well, which does control that, which I think was touched upon by Councillor Scott in saying that it could be investigated and reported to police to investigate. But equally, like I say, we can control.
Yeah, as councillors, John, we do get a lot of people reporting the neighbours because the camera's facing their garden and things like that. So that's why we are aware of what that is. But I'm just finding it hard to see from the lady's garden and back garden that of how the cameras could be, you know, going into her bedroom, into a back garden.
Yeah, without going on and doing a further site visit and seeing what they've installed, I can't confirm how that's taking place.
But if we were mindful to before this application, we could put conditions to alleviate things like that. Could I just ask about also, could we put a condition on, now we've heard about the pathway, that can be clear at all times for pedestrians to be able to walk on there? Because, you know, I've got concerns if that's a pathway and they're putting cars and things like that on, and if it is going to be an MOT station and a car wash, I know what car washes are like. People queue up for the cars to be washed, and the park over pavements, that, you know, they're not really considerate to people who's walking or with prams or whatever. So would that be able to be put down as a condition?
I think we'd struggle with a condition like that in terms of its enforceability, particularly as that, I mean, the highway and the footpath at the front of the site is adopted highway, which shouldn't be obstructed, and there is separate powers in place for the police or the council to take action against people blocking adopted highways. So I think we may struggle with putting a condition in place that says that. We can certainly put an informative on that informs them of their requirement to keep that free from obstruction at all times, and point them in the direction of the legislation.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
And my last one was the timings of what we've got down here for a car wash, car service and MOT and car sales. I haven't got a problem with it as such, but I have concerns over Sunday and bank holidays being open from 9 o'clock till 4. And same for the car servicing. But also it says that cars can be dropped off or collected during the hours of operation for car sales. Now we've got car sales here opening at 7:30. So your car servicing and MOTs 8 o'clock while 6 and 9 while 4. But yet they can also drop the cars off and pick them up between 7:30 and 7 o'clock at night, and then 8 o'clock at morning till 5 o'clock at night on a Saturday. So they're having 2 bites at cherry there, and I don't think that's fair to people who do live around here. I would be wanting a different times if the applicant were applicable to that. Definitely Sundays and bank holidays, and I would be mindful to think about where it says cars could be dropped off or collected during the hours of operation for car sales. I would want that to be took out because I don't think that's fair.
Okay, are you looking at the condition or the report about that?
It's on agenda page 17.
Oh, yes, yeah. Essentially, that was the environmental health officer was basically advised that they were okay with the hours that are set out in the condition, which is condition 4 on agenda page 22. They said they were happy with those hours, and they were also okay with the arrival and picking up and collection of vehicles which are used for the car wash and servicing and MOT use on the hours which are proposed for the car sales. But the way that the condition 4 is worded is essentially it would only allow the cars linked to the car servicing and the car wash to be there between 8 and 6 Monday to Friday and 9 and 4 Saturday, Sunday and bank holidays. We've not put a further provision in for the drop off and collection of vehicles, even though it was referred to in the report.
Okay, yeah, I've got it now. Yeah, I understand it now. Yeah. Sorry
Okay.
about that, John. Yeah.
No, it's okay, it's fine.
Yeah, but I've still got concerns about it being open on a Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, you can propose different hours, presumably, if that arises in your further debate.
Okay, thank you for that then, John. And my very last one, sorry.
Yeah.
The Ardins, what you say that taking down, and I think Councillor Foster said that they're already started taking them down on some wooden boarding put up already. When it comes down completely, what will be put in its place? Will it be shrubbery? Will it be a wall, a fence?
Well, that's what the conditions would control. The conditions require a boundary treatment scheme and also a scheme of landscaping to be provided. Like I say, the southern boundary, which is this one here, and then the eastern boundary, which you can't really see from that photo, but you can see it up here. That would need to be some rather substantial construction, and by substantial construction I mean something that's going to attenuate and provide some mitigation for noise. So that would be like a closed boarded fence or a wall, a brick wall. Whether there be any landscaping in front of it, that would be looked at as part of the conditions discharge.
Yeah, it may be nice to actually get to know what they are going to put there. We've come unstuck with this before in planning, saying that there's going to be some borders round and some kind of wall or fencing, but we haven't actually stipulated, and that's how the applicant gets away with putting up what they want to. If it were a wall, could we soften it up by some shrubbery or something like that? I don't know. I'm asking for your advice, really.
Yeah, we could require them to, as part of these conditions, we can get them to put a strip of landscaping in front of the boundary treatment that they put to the south of the site, to the southern boundary, which will be this one here next to the to the open land. We could probably achieve that, I would have thought.
Well, I'd like it at other side as well, near the restaurant, because obviously that's a restaurant. You don't want to see, something not nice there, would you?
In this area up here. Yes, that could be achieved through the conditions that are recommended as part of the schemes that are approved by the council.
Okay, thank you, John.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bazard. Our next speaker is Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Chair. I have to align myself with a number of comments from Councillor Bazard and previous speakers with regards to this particular application. When I look at my notes that I wrote down, particularly on agenda page 16, when it talks about the highway, I did write down the word surprise. And the reason for that is I'm like a number of residents, councillors on the eastern side of the district. I'm very familiar with that particular roadway and the way in which traffic builds up very quickly, particularly around the roundabouts, leading up to obviously the Asda roundabout and all the other businesses around that area. And likewise with previous sort of speakers, you know what the situation is with regards to car washes when they do end up on the side of the road queuing up to get in. And I can certainly see a great deal of problems resulting from any sort of usages of that type on that road, because cars do use both roads to get up to that roundabout. And they do get, they get very, very busy, and traffic builds up very, very quickly on that roundabout, and you soon get a gridlock. And adding this to it, particularly with cars potentially being on the side of the road, will also lead to further problems there. The other thing as well is there's been this reference to flooding that was made obviously by Mrs. McLaughlin, and sorry, and I am aware that obviously that there has been flooding in more recent times in that area, and so adding additional obviously employment on there which involves using water, is there a distinct possibility then that the drainage system would not be able to cope with that additional work? That's the one set of observations. The other one is I still feel very, very concerned about how close a business is to a residential property. And I know I've said this on previous applications, but I still feel very strongly that these are too close. And when somebody buys a house, then they don't buy it in the thought that there's going to be something very close by at a later date. So that is something else I feel that I want to make a comment about. So I'll stop there at this particular point in time, John.
Okay, it might be worth Adrian providing advice on the highways issues which you raised.
Okay, thanks. The other thing as well is, when you're sort of actually looking at this application, there seems to be an awful lot of different activities on this site. And obviously, as I said, being a resident on this side of the district and going past that area quite a lot, and you just sort of seem to think there's nothing. It's going to be a very busy site in terms of what's sort of being listed for what's being done there. And that raises another concern about the expectations of it, given the size of it. Thanks, John.
Adrian, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm trying to start my video, but it gives me a meeting alert and says I can't start it because the host has stopped it. I don't know if James could press a button or something. Ah, here we go.
Yeah,
okay,
you're on.
good morning, everybody. So, yeah, I do obviously recognise, as I think everybody does, that Colorado Way is a busy A road, the A639. With an application like this, we need to break down the component parts of it and make an assessment, and I can present that to you in terms of the trip generation and the actual assignment of those trips to the network. So we began with looking at the car sales element of this proposal, because of course it isn't just a hand car wash. There are a number of component parts to this, 3 or 4 different activities. So the number of trips associated with the car sales element will be minimal, and that is given the number of vehicles on display, i.e. for sale, in that this isn't a large sort of car supermarket site. And that element of the application would generate approximately 2 to 4 additional vehicular trips per day, new trips to the network across, say, an 8 or 9 hour working day. There's a car storage building associated with the application, which I think was referenced earlier in relation to some storage of taxis, I believe. However, I do believe this is fairly small, and I think it can accommodate 16 vehicles as a maximum. It's my understanding that these vehicles won't form part of the sales display, and they'll be retained in storage until they are leased to an individual or a company. And so again, the vehicular movements associated with that particular element of the application are relatively low at about 4 to 6 trips a day. That brings me on to the MOT facility. I think we must recognise there's also an MOT facility on site. Again, we've focused quite a bit on the hand car wash element, and I will come to that. I'm not ignoring that. So it's a single MOT bay. Vehicles, obviously, as we all are probably familiar with, have to be booked in for an MOT. A typical MOT takes between 45 and 60 minutes. So with a single bay across a working day, again, this would generate a fairly low number of trips, but approximately 10 arrivals and obviously departures, therefore 22 two-way trips. So aside from the car wash, in terms of your non-car wash vehicular movements to the network, and there's a general consensus that these would probably be new trips to the network. They wouldn't be on the network already. So you're talking about a net increase in trips. So all the other uses over and above the car wash, approximately 30, worst case scenario, 30 a day over the course of the opening hours, or 15 arrivals and 15 departures. And my calculations suggest that would generate one vehicle either arriving or departing from this site around every 30 to 40 minutes of the working day. Now that brings me on to the car wash element of the application. There are 3 wash bays, and my general understanding of hand car washes, I've used them before, as I'm sure many people have, are that you can't wash 3 cars at once. There's a process, so they jet wash, they sort of dry, and then they hoover, and so on and so forth. Now, with 3 bays, we use something called Tricks, which is for all planning applications we use this. It is a tool we use to work out how many trips are assigned to the highways network depending on the planning application type. So we've used the 3 bays, and there is the outcome of that is that approximately every 4 to 5 minutes, bearing in mind that washing a car by hand isn't a 2 to 3 minute process, it can take 10 or 15 minutes, but the car wash element of the planning application will generate one vehicular movement approximately every 5 to 6 minutes, and that's in terms of an arrival. Of course, those vehicles have to depart as well. So if you've got 3 vehicles in situ in the what they call the wash bays, you've got space for around 3 to 4 vehicles within the site to stand. My observations and previous involvement with this type of planning application is that if you decide your car needs to be washed and you take it to where you think there's a hand car wash, or you know there's one like this, and if you see 7, maybe 8 vehicles already within the site, some being washed and some queuing, you're not particularly inclined to stand and queue and wait. It's a little bit like a drive-through, where the threshold for that is if there's 13 or 14 cars in a queue and you can see that from the public highway, you're not going to take your car there. You're going to come back at another time because you know you're going to be waiting at least half an hour for your car to get washed. And that's in terms of highway safety. Now, human behaviour is such, and we're not social engineers, you are, and you may get incidences of that. In terms of highway safety, the A639 is an A road. It is lit, it is 30 miles an hour. There's no obstructions, and there are the 43-metre sight lines. I'll just go back to, before I go too much onto road safety, in terms of the capacity of the network and the ability for it to absorb, if you like, additional traffic, and those numbers that I've just read out to you, those statistics. Now, the non-car wash users are probably going to be new trips to the network, so that's your 15 arrivals and departures a day. Your car wash element, however, a little bit like some previous applications we've discussed, Many of those trips will be on the network at the moment. So you're going to work, or you're coming home from work, or you're going somewhere else, and you think, I need to wash my car. Highly unlikely that if you live a mile or two away at 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday night, you're going to think, I know, I'm going to take my car to the car wash on Colorado Way as a specific dedicated trip that doesn't involve something else. That would, of course, if someone did decide that, and it's not improbable, would be a new trip to the network. But the bulk of the car wash related trips will be passing trade, people that were either on Colorado Way or somewhere else in the local area that decided they were going to use this car wash. The worst case scenario, peak time movements for the car wash are 10 to 11 trips, as I mentioned, but they're not new trips to the network. In terms of the local roundabout and the ratio of flow to capacity, and the ability of that roundabout to cope with the trips generated from a planning application such as this, it's well within capacity, and this planning application wouldn't cause a severe impact on traffic congestion or add significantly to the traffic congestion that we've all heard is already in the area, particularly at peak times. You do tend to get a spike with these types of planning applications on a Saturday morning, strangely, I don't know why that is, or a Sunday morning. But again, that's not your Monday to Friday, 8 till 9, or typical 5 to 6 p.m. peak. That's peak of people perhaps waking up on the way to the supermarket and decide that they need to wash their car. So highways development management within the council are satisfied that the network can absorb and deal with the trips generated by this planning application, in addition to no concerns in terms of highway or pedestrian safety. It's a 2 metre footway, a 1.5 metre verge, and I think previously, as was previously said and informative, that the footway mustn't be obstructed by a standing vehicle is something we can add to the application, and then potentially take action if there was evidence that that was occurring on a regular basis, therefore impacting on pedestrian safety. So I think I've covered a number of items. I'm happy to take any more questions on these issues or any other issues, Chair.
Can I come back, Chair, please?
Yeah, go on, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I take exactly everything that you're saying, Adrian, in terms of the theoretical basis of the calculations. But we are in a period of time when a lot of the businesses in this area are not operating fully. They are, obviously the furloughed and so forth, and it's been like this now for quite a few months. And so you are going to see potentially, a lot more passing trade will sort of say, oh, I'll have that, because yeah, there are people going to Escape, there are people going to Eastern Court, there are people going to Asda, and there are people going to the restaurant on the roundabout, which I've forgotten the name of at this moment in time. But the fact of the matter is, and this doesn't include as well people who cut through in order to get to Asda from the M62 or from Pontefract if they want to go for a larger shop. So that I still say that there is a lot of already existing traffic on this area, and this will just add to what is becoming a very cluttered region of the network in that area. Thanks, Chair. That's an observation, a question.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. We have Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. John, I have a few more questions to ask, actually two, if that's okay with you. So I wonder, why have there been no documents stating the potential impact of noise and odor, or any impact from radios, jet wash machines, and also spray control being, obviously used with the documents? So how can the committee know whether it is a good proposal if we only have part of proposal with the rest to be submitted later? And would the increased number of cars not have adverse effect on air quality in the area? with this being a residential area, I wonder why does this site not even fall within the air quality management area itself? So that's something the council need to look into, because all the residential areas should be in the air quality control area. That's my first question. The second one is, what job opportunities will this new proposal create? Or do we know all other car wash or car servicing sites in Castleford completely full of staff at the moment? And if the site, the use of site is provide employment opportunity and skill development under SPA 5, why would it be unreasonable to actually impose a planning condition which would require these two documents to be arranged before the permission be granted? Thank you.
Okay, fair question, Councillor Harvey. In terms of noise and odour, there was a noise survey submitted as part of the application. That's on the planning file, and that was requested by the Environmental Health Officer to allow them to come to a conclusion and decision on in terms of their recommendation. The conditions that are put forward, they're some of them are quite standard conditions that relate to controlling elements which may impact on amenity. So the noise scheme, the odour scheme, the overspray scheme, they are conditions which have been used on other hand car washers elsewhere in the district. The applicant is aware of the conditions that have been recommended and has chosen to, rather than put together the details to submit at the application stage, they've opted to accept those conditions and deal with it as a discharge of condition application. I suppose that in terms of whether it's reasonable to do that, we have to balance the cost element of putting together lots of schemes to discharge. I mean, with this application, there's 27 conditions, so I'm not sure how many have to be discharged and how many have to complied with, but say it's 10 or 15 that they need to discharge. They have to put together a scheme to and submit it to us, and there's obviously a cost involved with that. So where it's considered that we know that we can get a scheme that's going to be acceptable, that's going to ensure noise, odour, overspray is adequately controlled, then national planning policy guidance essentially requires that we take that approach, unless the applicant wants to take the approach that it's dealt with as part of the planning application. So I don't think that we're really in a position that we can insist that we have that detail unless we need it to ensure, to know that it's definitely going to make the application acceptable. Air quality management areas, they're drawn up by our environmental health team, and this essentially doesn't fall within one. I'm not sure where the boundary is for the air quality management area. I know there is one quite close, because they tend to focus around motorway junctions and the M62 motorway. But ultimately, it doesn't fall within one, and we have to take a view as to what's reasonable for an application of this scale to insist on any measures which will contribute to air quality in the district as a whole. And I think, given the scale of this application, it would probably be unreasonable for us to insist on a number of measures such as electric vehicle parking provision or electric vehicle charging provision as part of the application that's in front of us.
John, can I just, sorry, Chair, can I just come back to this point? John, given the fact that
Yes.
certain I would say that it wasn't the few cameras, according to what Wendy reported, the few floodlights has been already installed, and that's well before the application being not accepted, except considered. So given that as a record, do you think that the committee will be really confident to say that the rest of the conditions imposed could be maintained by the applicant?
Sorry, I just noticed that I didn't comment on employment, and then I'll come back to the question you've just raised about conditions. Yeah, in terms of employment, yes, we can add a condition on which, if you consider it's necessary, and if that would require a scheme which details how the employment opportunities which are provided by the application are promoted locally first, in the first instance. So that is possible for us to include as a condition. And the other point that you're making, which is about the conditions and how confident we are. Ultimately, there's no provision within sort of planning legislation or planning policy or guidance which sets out that we can take an approach which requires details to be upfront because we're not confident that they will submit them for discharge condition, or that we insist, or that we don't grant permission because we're not confident they'll discharge the conditions. Because at the end of the day, there is an enforcement route which can be taken. If the artificial lighting, for example, which has been put in place, is considered unacceptable, there is an enforcement route which the planning enforcement team can take, which can rectify it. They can seek its amendment or removal to a scheme which is suitable and which would be controlled as a condition of any grant of planning permission. So that's the powers that are in place already for the council to address any issues in that respect.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, there are no more questions from councillors?
Yes, please, Chair. For some reason,
Councillor Scott.
Adrian, I've got issues with the egress and the access. When you've talked about people not queuing for a car wash, I live in Castleford and there's a car wash in Glassown and it's regularly, people are regularly queuing on the main highway. So I've got concerns here.
Yeah, I'll put the others on to stop them.
It's a single access, it's a single carriageway, and people could be queuing on that access to that site, and then will then be holding up for the traffic. As you say, as Adrian said, most people are on the way to work or on the way back to work when they're going shopping, so it's going to be busy in any case. So then that road could be blocked by people queuing to have the car wash. And people do wait a long time sometimes for the car to be washed. And also, another one for Adrian is where the no site access, can they, is there going to be no right turn coming up from the, which is where the escape is? Have they got to go around the roundabout to come in, or can they get access by the then that road? I'm really concerned about that. John, I've got concerns around where you talked about when, and Councillor Forster did this as well, he talked about a pre-presentation into possible 2010. And Councillor Forster said that they'd not gained permission for the access and egress. But yet we're giving permission for this. But you said they got permission, so which is right. We want site access and egress the same as this one is, and how many properties? I think you said 19 were going to go on it. So what's, and the traffic volume of traffic will have expanded. I've got real concerns about safety of the road here. I've got concerns about the proposed car wash, because we've got car wash in our ward and we have problems with working out of hours sometimes. I've also got issues Councillor Blizzard's talked about around the hours. I don't agree with it being open at all on a bank holiday. I don't agree with the hours on a Sunday, but not at all on a bank holiday. And I think there should be conditions put in that the car, if it does get permission, that it shouldn't be open on a bank holiday. That's the car wash. And I've also got issues around the applicant by the resident. And if you do, then he's not taking it, he's not thinking about community when he's fly tipping. So how do you think it's about the community when he's permission? Thank you.
I'll let Adrian answer about the issues you raised about access and egress, but I can comment on the 2010 permission and the 2010 permission apparently got stalled at the stage which related to agreement of a Section 106 agreement. In terms of the comments that have been made which relate to access, I think the main issue really is whether it's access problems as a result of landowners not coming to agreements about ransom strips which may be in place, rather than an access issue for going onto Colorado Way from a planning or development, highways development management point of view. Again, Adrian can probably provide some opinion on that point, but I think the main issue that's related to developing this site is down to land ownership issues, which are preventing its sort of to be unlocked, if you like, as a result of a simple agreement being come to between the respective landowners. But that's something that's separate to the planning application consideration, which is probably why it was able to gain planning permission, or but then stalled at the Section 106 agreement stage. In terms of the hours of operation, that they are obviously something that you can raise to, if you're minded to approve, you can raise alternative hours as a motion. The condition as recommended can be amended. And in terms of works taking place out of hours at other car washes, and if this one was successful and in operation, again, that comes down to a planning enforcement matter. That's how the council can control it, and it wouldn't be reasonable for us to refuse permission because we thought someone wouldn't adhere to a compliance condition on a planning permission, given that we have the power to take enforcement action against breaches of condition. So I'll hand over now to Adrian, who can answer in terms of the issues you access.
Thank you, John. I do recognise the concerns in terms of vehicles standing on the public highway. I didn't mention this when I was previously talking, but I think this is perhaps one of the better design sites. Now, I don't claim to be an expert in the operation of a hand car wash, but I've sat in many queues myself and watched how these things happen on the larger sites, and they're not always designed quite like this. Some of them have just got one access point, one egress space for only 2 or 3 cars within the site, particularly if it was something like a former filling station or similar that has been converted to facilitate a hand car wash. What I think will happen here is you'll have 3 cars being washed at any one time, washed, dried, hoovered, or whatever, and then there is space for 3 to 4 vehicles to stand in a line. I think the operators will put one vehicle next to the other, which will soon mean that half a dozen half a dozen drivers' vehicles will be waiting who won't have actually started having the car wash. Now, if you do pull up or drive or slow down to look at a site or to take your car into a facility like this, and you see 3 cars being washed and 6 waiting to be washed, I think human behaviour is such that you may be inclined to come back at another time, unless it's so urgent that you can't. Now, I'm not trying to say that from time to time somebody might not stand on Colorado Way indicating to go into the site, but I think it is also safe to say that other drivers would rapidly let them know that they were blocking the public highway, and if that was you in the car or any of us and there was someone behind on the horn and lights and you realised you were blocking, I think that would be fair to say that you would realise you were obstructing the free flow of traffic and drive on. Now, again, I haven't got a crystal ball, just trying to maybe paint a picture of my observations elsewhere and some few previous all but identical planning applications that we've had before. But ultimately, we can never say for 100%, as in drive-through takeaway type examples, that traffic might not back up onto the public highway. And if that happens, then we can try to take some sort of enforcement action. But in this particular case, I'm minded to suggest that that won't be an occurrence, or it certainly won't be a frequent occurrence because of the depth of the site. And as I said, the fact that up to 8 to 9 vehicles will be currently waiting, and therefore that suggests that you're going to be at least 20 minutes, half an hour before you even start to get your car washed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Aidan. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, fine, thank you.
I have nobody in for any more questions. No. Then I will go to Frances to ask to go to the vote, please. Can I ask members to please call your video on?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, about that. It sounds okay. It sounds like it's vibrating.
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are. Is that your end or is it my end?
Try again, Councillor.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
That's better. Yeah, thank you. I'm mindful to propose that we approve this, Chair, but I just want to make it clear, or if John can make it clear to me, that if I were mindful to propose for it for approval, would we be able to put the conditions in about the days of opening and opening hours? I'm okay about the drainage because it's under condition number 6 and 7 for about the drainage into the water system and things like that. And I want to know about the pathway. I don't want to leave it all down to enforcement because it's got to be a condition for them to be able to enforce it. So I am mindful to approve, but I just want these clearing up, John, if you could, please. Or legal. I'm not fussy who gives me answers.
Apologies, I stopped sharing the screen because I thought it was going to the vote. But in terms of the hours of use, yeah, you can propose some alternative hours, and I think Kevin can advise on the legal way that that's done as part of the meeting. In terms of the highway condition that's proposed, we can put it on as an informative that they're not to block the highway, but as there's separate powers available to the council and the police to control people blocking a public footpath, I don't think it's something that we could introduce as a planning enforcement, as a planning condition, and then seek a planning enforcement team to deal with it, as it would be a highway enforcement team or even a police matter. The other condition which you mentioned which I believe was that drainage or the CCTV.
Yeah, you said that we could put that down as a condition.
Yes,
and
right. Yeah, we can include that CCTV as part of the a scheme that's submitted to us
for lighting and everything like that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay then. It's the opening times that I have got a concern with, John. And if your applicant, agrees to them, I'm willing to, put this forward for approval. But I wouldn't want it opening on a Sunday and bank holidays, really. 8 o'clock while 6 o'clock's ample for anybody's business, I think. And I think for the residents who live around this area, I think it should be, we should be a bit more considerate for them for car washing and MOTs and things like that. They have enough hassle with the shopping centre and that. So I think Sundays and bank holidays it shouldn't be. I would be mindful that I know a lot of people want the cars washing on a Sunday because it's the only day they've got off. But I'm thinking about the people who live there, and I'm happy with 8 o'clock while 5 what they're 8 o'clock while 6 what they're asking, but not Sundays and bank holidays. So if they're agreeable with that, I'll propose it.
I mean, it's up to chair how she wants to sort it or play it, but perhaps if after the vote is taken, if a discussion could then be taken, if relevant, which relates to conditions, we can work out what the committee is happy with hours wise, and then I can take it forward from there, go back to the applicant, or we can simply issue a decision on that basis. But,
okay then. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Can I give some advice, Chair? Kevin Winter, solicitor.
Yes, Kevin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Kevin.
Yeah. Yeah, just in terms of process, whether you want to approve it or refuse it, obviously you need a proposer and a seconder to any proposal. In terms of any changes to conditions, actually you should agree on any changes in conditions before you actually vote, and you need to do it as a committee, really. Obviously Councillor Blezard has intimated some changes, so how you would do it, say for example you wanted to approve it, you need somebody to propose it, second it, with those changes in the conditions, particularly the hours. So you need to do it up front before you exercise the vote. Is that clear, Chair?
Yeah, that's fine, Kevin. We were going to do that anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think we have two. I think it's Councillor Swift and Councillor Eptingstall. Have you got your hands up?
Yes.
Councillor Swift.
Yeah, I think if some of these conditions we're talking about now, I've got concerns about them, Chair. I think that if you're mindful to have a car wash and car sales, that where you don't think it's acceptable for them to be open on a Sunday or a bank holiday, I honestly think that you should be looking at refusal. In other words, if it's going to be damaging to the amenities, for a business that would normally be open on those days, in fact, they'd normally expect that's peak commercial activity. And the issue about the parking on the road, I think we've got John, who quite understandably is saying it's a bit iffy making a planning condition for that. But Adrian, when he was responding to members' questions, Adrian was saying, well, it might be okay because we can put a condition on it. Now, I think what we're talking about here is that from what an awful lot of people have said, there's quite an expectation that this business would spill out onto the road. And I think that the very fact we're talking about putting these kind of sticking plaster type conditions on I think we perhaps ought to be considering whether or not this is actually the right place for this particular kind of business. And, you know, John talked about 27 conditions. I think when you start talking about 27 conditions, you should start thinking about whether or not it is actually the right thing to approve, Chair.
Councillor Eptonstall.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've still got concerns about the privacy of this lady who lives in this house. It's closest to this industrial site. And I would support Kevin in 27 objections to it. Also, should say conditions added to it. What if this developer doesn't take the videos down? It's all right saying we're going to ask him to take videos down. This lady's privacy has been invaded by this developer. The way I see it is, from my personal view, is to not vote to approve it on the condition that a resident's privacy has been invaded. I've no doubt the reply will come back, oh, we'll take them down. Tell us what to do and we'll do it. The point is that it's been done without planning permission. Videos have been put up at a height, and not only this lady, but other residents' privacy has been invaded as well. So that's my point. I think he knows what he's doing, putting these up in the first place, and he's waiting for us to tell him to take them down. Well, that's wasting a lot of time. And people's time costs money. And it might not look that way to him, but it looks that way to me, Chair. So that's my point. Residents' privacy has been invaded already. Thank you.
Did you say Councillor Harvey? Councillor
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo Councillor Swift's opinion about the opening hours. I do also have a concern over the closure of a condition of closure on Sunday and bank holidays. I don't think it's viable for business, car sales of MOT or anything of that nature with a car wash as well. On the other hand, I do think that the SPA 5 condition is, if there is any condition need to be added on, that should be on. So we need to know clearly what's the benefit in terms of employment for this nature of business in the area. And my last point is 27 condition already. If we keep adding on, get it to over 30, it is just not the right place to have that business itself. And the air quality management area is something the council also need to investigate to make sure that we not already fail the residents and then added on more traffic congestion in the area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I've taken comments and questions. So now I will go to the officer Frances to go to the vote. Can I please ask members to put your videos on, please, and unmute?
Chair, I will leave. Chair, I will leave now, and thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Foster, I thought you'd already gone.
No, you said to leave as soon as the vote came, so I'll leave now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Sandra, how are we doing this?
You can put your video on now and unmute, and Frances, the committee officer, will be taking your names and you will for the vote.
Can I just jump in?
Yes, Kevin?
Yeah, you need a proposal from the floor.
Yes, but I'm getting everybody on first, Kevin.
Right, okay, thank you.
4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Right, thank you.
You've just muted yourself, Sandra.
Officer's recommendation is approval. Do I have that moved?
Move it, Chair, with the conditions that I've asked for.
Yeah. Do I have that seconded?
Second it, Chair, with the conditions.
Okay, then we will go to the vote. Frances, will you take the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask each councillor for their vote in turn. Councillor Blezard.
For.
Councillor Ellis.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Councillor Hepworth.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Sorry, was that against?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Against.
Councillor Swift.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Tennant-King.
Against.
Councillor Whitehouse.
For.
Councillor Heptonstall.
Against.
And lastly, Councillor Pickin.
For.
So I confirm I've got everybody. And just bear with me. Okay, Chair, I can confirm that there were 4 votes in favour, 8 votes against, and there were no abstentions. Is that okay?
Chair, could you repeat that number? I didn't quite get it.
Sorry about that. I'll do it again. There were 4 votes in favour. There were 8 votes against. And there were no abstentions.
So, Chair, that motion has been defeated, so you need another proposal. Thank you.
Yes, Kevin, I'm just going to ask you that. Could I have another proposal off the floor as that was defeated?
I'll move refusal, Chair.
Okay, is that seconded?
I'll second that, Chair.
Right, then we go to the vote again. Francis, can you take the vote, please?
Okay, so
Do we need the reasons first, Chair, or do they come after?
No, they come after.
Right.
Okay, so councillors, I'll take each of you in turn again. Councillor Blezard.
Against.
Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, what was that, Ellis? I missed it.
Sorry, yes, Councillor Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Hepworth.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Scott.
For.
Councillor Swift.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Tennant-King.
For.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Against.
Councillor Heptonstall.
For.
Councillor Pickin.
Against.
Okay, Chair, I can confirm that there were 8 votes in favour, 4 votes against, and there were no abstentions.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you.
Now I come back to committee for reasons for refusal. Over.
Chair, I mean, the reasons that were in my mind when I moved refusal were traffic, drainage, residential and visual amenity, and prejudicial to the proper development of the land to the east. Those were my. Now, other members may have different reasons in there.
I agree with Kevin's.
I think Kevin's summarised it very well for us all.
Yeah, so do I.
So do I.
Are those reasons okay, John? Do you need anything more?
No, that's fine. I'll go with those, and if anything arises, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
and that is refused. We will now take a recess for 10 minutes. So please unmute your microphones and turn your videos Thank you. Then we will start agenda item 2, temporary use of existing engineered pad and soil treatment. And the presenting officer is Ian Garrett. So over to you, Ian.
Please bear with us, Chair. It's overcome technical difficulty.
It's okay, Ian. We are experiencing a bit of feedback as well today, so please bear with us, everybody.
Firstly, can you see the screen presentation, Chair?
Yes, Ian.
And you can hear me?
Yes.
Right. Thank you, James. That's good. Thank you. Right. I didn't hear the introduction. Can you tell me when to start, please, Chair?
You can start when you're ready now, Ian, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. The application before you is for an application for a proposed soil treatment facility at the land at Welbeck landfill site in Normanton. Your published report is actually supplemented with additional information which has been circulated to all members of the committee. And the information includes consultation responses received after the report was published. These are from the Environmental Services, Environmental Health Officer, the Council's Air Quality Officer, both raising no objections to the proposal, subject to the imposition of planning conditions which are contained in your report. The Council's property management services, who are the landowner, the landlord of the site, have also confirmed they have no objections to the proposals. In addition to the RAT's objection letter has also been circulated in full to all members of the committee prior to this meeting, and also for confirmation, members are informed that the Council for Normanton, Councillor David Dagger, has objected to the proposals. So turning to the site and its location, some of you will be familiar with the site. It is the existing Welbeck landfill site, and the area which is the subject of the application is an existing engineered pad which is located in the centre of the Welbeck landfill site. This is an aerial view of the site which shows the position. It's quite close to the centre of the site within the River Loop area. Orientation of this particular slide is that it's basically facing south to the top of the page, north to the bottom of the page. The site access road crosses the Bowspring Bridge. There's a site compound and welfare office and maintenance depot along with the infamous gas management system, and then behind that facility is an existing engineered pad. That was the site formerly of the composting area for the household green waste. Immediately to the south of that site is an area which is the remnants of the containment cells which are currently being backfilled with non-hazardous waste for landfill. And the land immediately to the north of the proposed site is the undeveloped area where the proposal is to restore the land to a lower contour level in the adjacent landfill area by application of soil cover and then finally through restoration. The Welbeck site is within the lower Calder Valley. This is the River Calder which passes around the River Loop. It's approximately 2 kilometres from Wakefield and approximately 1.8 metres from Normanton town centres. But there are other smaller settlements which are referred to in your report, which surround the site. Now, the approximate distances between the proposed site area, the engineered pad, and the nearest sensitive receptors are indicated in your report. The closest one being the canal side cottages, which is about 900 metres or so away from this site. So considerable distances are involved here. There were as well, which is a new development along Nelly Spindler Way and Neil Fox Way, again over a kilometre away. Similarly with the Altos and Normanton, more than 1.3 kilometres away as the crow flies. So turning to the details of the proposals, if I just put the slide on, you can see the existing site compound area, and then adjacent to the compound on the site, this is the existing facility. This is the proposed pad that was previously used for all of the windrow composting of green wastes, which came from the collection authority, including Wakefield Council. So the proposal comprises a soil treatment facility. It would process up to 29,999, so just short of 30,000 tonnes of soils from construction projects which may have elements of hydrocarbon contamination present. These generally would be petrols and fuel oils, that sort of thing. They are potentially classed as hazardous by the EA, and so the soils brought into the site would have to have some form of treatment prior to any use in their development for restoration. The site would manage also up to about 20,000 tonnes a year of non-hazardous soils. So in all, just short of 50,000 tonnes per year would pass through this facility, and over the period of 5 years will generate potentially just short of 150,000 tonnes as potential soil cover then for use in the Welbeck landfill restoration. The proposal would generate approximately 8 vehicle loads a day equivalent, which is 16 movements, using the existing site access well, wheel wash and weighbridge. The site access is approximately 2 kilometres long from the top of Boundary Lane roundabout, and then using the far more than that, designed for in excess of 70 vehicles a day, day. So the
Chair Ian, I'm really sorry about this, and I don't know if it's your end or my end, but yeah. I'm not getting what you're saying. It's all muffled.
Right.
Right, thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me now?
Yes, Ian, you're fine.
Okay, I'll carry on. I'll not speak too fast. I'll carry on, but I'll make the presentation short as I can. So the sewer treatment facility is a temporary development. It would use the existing engineered pad, and as I've said, it was previously used for the windrow composting of green waste. The water from the bioremediation process would be collected within the pad itself. It has a perimeter interceptor, has a sump drain into one corner of the site. That is then collected and then pumped through to a second pond, effectively. It's then pumped across the aqueduct, across the river into the Yorkshire Water Sewage System, sewer system, and it goes to a water treatment plant. So it's entirely self-contained in terms of the control of leachate from the site. Any contaminated soils would be stockpiled into a biopile on the site, and that would be on top of a network of perforated pipe work to create a vacuum pump and encourage aeration of airflow through the soils. And the biopiles themselves, i.e. the soils themselves, would be stacked no more than 6 metres high. So within the confines of the site and where it is located, this would be much, much lower than the adjacent landfill. and it would be much out of sight as well. And I've got some photographs to show you of the surrounding views of the site from the high elevation points from east to west. The soils accepted for treatment will be subject to a process of 8 to 12 weeks and would be turned midway generally. When the remediation process being completed, the soils would be screened. So there would be a power screen on the site, but there have been trommels and power screens on the site before without any difficulties. The soils would be treated and used solely in conjunction with the Welbeck Management Restoration Plan. It's a plan in the report which I've continually made reference to. Members will recall that in the revised scheme, the landfill restoration was to complete the existing cells, which is this grey area, and has some progress made on that since this application was approved. And this lower area, which is the white area coloured on the plan, which is shown for agricultural pasture land, would include the current area of the application, which is before you today. So after 5 years, this area will be restored in accordance with that overall restoration composite plan. The whole of the site is in the river loop area would be restored by the end of 2025 anyway, so there would be no delay in any of the restoration operations which members have previously approved under the parent applications. So turning to publicity and consultation, the application has been subject to the required publicity, consultation. Consultees have returned no objections in principle, subject to conditions. There are 89 objections received to the application, including from Normanton Town Council, the RATS Group, and the local ward member for Normanton, Councillor David Jagger. The objections have been summarised in your report. They cover a broad range of issues relating to the strength of public feeling against continuing developments in the Normanton area and the negative perceptions that arise from that. The history and the operational issues are also mentioned in the delay in restoring the Welbeck site from the original grant planning permission, which was in 1997. And there is also obviously objections to the potential environmental impacts of the current proposals on the local community. And disturbance to amenity. So the current proposals have been addressed, and the weight that can be given to certain matters raised by some of the objectors has also been discussed in the report. So briefly turning to the assessment, the detailed assessment is given in your report, but the key points as summarised are that this site is included in the green belt. It's safeguarded as a site within the adopted development plan for a waste management facility, and restoration of the landfill, both the void 2023 and the Remainer site by 2025. So the proposed soil treatment facility in context within the site of the Welbeck landfill satisfies the LDF plan objectives in terms of the greenbelt and the waste management issues, and it will result in enhancing the natural environment, making effective use of the resources and minimising risks and pollution by using this particular waste stream. So this current application would take place for a temporary period only, and it wouldn't interfere with the permitted restoration period for the landfill site and would not prejudice the implementation of the scheme that we have already approved. It is also consistent with the operation of a landfill facility for recovery of resources, and it does also fit with the policies in terms of waste hierarchy and proximity principle. But basically, it is another source to allow a waste stream to be deposited and used locally after treatment. It's considered that the small-scale nature of the proposal and the actual site itself is 70 metres by 70 metres, the actual pad. So it's a small scale, and the distance to nearest receptors is quite large. So there would be benefits of attenuation by virtue of distance. So that weighing the balance would likely overcome any substantial harm to the greenbelt in that consideration. So the proposals are obviously to recover and treat soils to enable the final restoration of the site by 2025. And therefore, they do not conflict with the council's locational greenbelt and waste management policies, which are set out in the NPPF and the National Waste Planning Policy. Consideration of the environmental issues are detailed also in the report, so that also includes issues of the design, landscape, impact on ecology, pollution control issues, contaminated land, historic assets. So your office assessment is that the proposals are in conformity with the relevant development policies. It can be the officer view is that development can be undertaken in an environmentally acceptable way, provided that conditions are imposed in accordance with the policy aims and objectives of the plan. So conditions have now been recommended in this report for temporary timescale, which assures that the site would be restored along with the remaining Welbeck site by 2025. There's an element of flood risk protection as a measure included in relation to the temporary site features, and that's relating to the datum heights, the floor levels of the site, and also the requirements to use the existing site wheel wash, prevent mud on road, comply with the dust and odour management plan, comply with noise control levels and hours of working, which are the same as the existing Welbeck landfill site, and to restrict the heights of the soils on the site to no more than 6 metres, and that site delivery times will also be consistent with the existing operational hours of the Welbeck site, and also the groundwater protection measures will be in place to ensure that nothing is discharged other than through the foul system in relation to the operation of that pad. So there are a separate regime, as I've explained in the report, for the environmental permitting, which also covers some of these matters, but is in far more detail and to avoid any unnecessary overlap of regulatory control. Obviously, the permit would be a primary document to regulate the daily operational activities of the site. So it's concluded on balance that the proposal is in accordance with the policies of the LDF, and that having regard to all other material considerations, that the proposal should be supported. So the officer view and recommendation is as per your report to approve this development subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. We have 4 representatives here. They are not speaking, but they are here for members to ask questions. So would any members like to ask questions to the officers available? We have James Cook, and Andy Langan, John Owens and Clive Saul. They're all specialists in their own mind. So if any councillors would like to ask questions, please. Councillor Swift, have you got your hand up?
I had, Chair. One of the bits that I didn't understand from the report and I apologise if it was something that Ian covered and I missed, was that the report says that these big long mounds of the material that's brought on site, that the part of the process is to aerate them to presumably pass air either naturally or forced through the pile, and then it says that the air that came off after it had gone through would then be collected, and I didn't understand how that worked. I didn't understand what it was that collected the air that had been passed through these big long mounds and stopped it just kind of escaping into the atmosphere. That's my question, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. There is a schematic diagram, and I don't have it up in front of me, but effectively there is a blower or a large fan. It sucks the air through the soils, through the pipe network to create a vacuum, aerating the soils, so dragging clean air through the soil pile. On the exhaust side of the blower, i.e. the fan, that would pass through, there's an interceptor to collect water. So any air coming off with moisture content, then air is condensed, it goes into a tank, so it's intercepted. The air is then passed through a biofilter. So effectively, and the gentleman present in the room may correct me or add to this, it's a 1.5 metre compost type material with a system on to irrigate it to keep it damp, but then a moisture, a tarpaulin type material over the top of it. Effectively, it's cleaning and scrubbing the air as it comes out as an exhaust from the blower. So you're not getting air which isn't scrubbed being distributed or blown out into the atmosphere. Now, that's my simple understanding of it, and I'm sure the technical experts can elucidate further.
Am I able to speak? My name is John Owens from a company called Provectus. We're working with FCC on a number of sites where we biologically treat soils for restoration use. So yes, the soil itself comes in from a variety of sites locally, and it gets tested when it comes in to make sure it's suitable for treatment. And then a week later, it's formally accepted once we have checked all of the chemical parameters. It gets placed onto a soil pipework, a pipework network. So every 3 meters, there's a perforated pipe, and a vacuum is applied to the soil so that the air exchanges several times in the soil every hour. So that stops any volatiles being released, and then it's collected in effectively a welded pipework system before, as I said, it goes into a separator, which is a bit like a Dyson vacuum cleaner. It causes a cyclone that allows water to be separated out from the air, and the water goes into a separate holding tank and treatment system, and the air goes through. It's a mixture of compost with a small amount of soil, biofilter, and it removes 99 point something% of any volatiles. So anything that's got odors or benzene, anything that is that can be air stripped out of the soil is effectively removed prior to discharge. And it's the air is tested regularly under a permit condition for any contaminants that are in the air, and it's you just don't have any odours at all, because we are talking about very lightly contaminated soils that need to be treated so they can be suitably used on the restoration scheme.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor Swift?
Thank you, Chair.
I have Councillor Blizzard next.
Thank you, Chair. John's just sort of like told me what I wanted to know. I wanted to know in layman's terms how it all worked for the soil and where the soil were coming from. So that's been answered. But could I ask another one, which Ian might be able to tell me. It just seems really strange to me that we're allowing 29,999 tonnes. Why didn't we just call it 30 tonnes? Is there a limit on what we can accept? Is it costings or something like that? It just seems a bit weird to me. Thank you, Chair.
There are some thresholds. There are some thresholds, certainly in planning terms, and there are some thresholds, I believe, in permit terms. So the proposal is to allow the development to be considered within those parameters. So this application has been screened. It's well below the threshold for an EIA submission, so that's accepted. I've nothing further on that, unless John has got something on the permits issue, whether or not there is a threshold on the EA permit that is proposed for the site.
I mean, I can probably pick up on that, councillors and Ian. I'm James Cook. I'm the estates manager for FCC. The 29,999 tonnes limit that's put in the planning application is simply to ensure that it stays within the local planning system rather than being referred to a national planning forum. That's the only reason. It's a threshold linked number, really, that just keeps it in the local planning arena rather than a national one, which seems more appropriate given the nature of the development that we're looking at. And that's, as Ian says, that's then read across into the EIA, into the environmental permit that's also been submitted to the Environment Agency.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Chair. I have to say, obviously, this is a very technical report with a great deal of detail in it, so you're going to have to bear with me for a minute or two. If on agenda page 43, the comments that have been made by Normanton Town Council and the issues that they've raised in terms of their concerns, so how will all this be avoided? That's the first question, how that will be avoided on there. On page 44, with respect to the residents, how will they be able to be reassured if it was managed to be passed? On page 45, there are a whole list of issues that have been identified by RATs, and I'm just sort of wondering what sort of response is there to those sort of comments that have been obviously included in the report, as well as obviously the additional information that they have included, which obviously we've all read. So obviously this probably do with some sort of response to those points and that. And then finally, am I correct in thinking that this soil is going towards obviously part of the reclamation of the site and returning it to whatever sort of future plans there are for this site? So, you know, it is obviously this is a key part of the redevelopment of the site in the future. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. Normanton Town Council raised a number of points which broadly are concerns about or clarification about what kind of material would be deposited at the site, what kind of assurances could be given regarding the level of contamination and how high are the risks towards the public. And then how does it fit with contamination testing? Is the pad sufficient, and how would it be treated? Now, a number of themes running through this, I think, have partly explained, or certainly Mr. Owens has explained about how it works on the site, the method. In terms of the level of contamination, there's a two-stage process of testing, which is a requirement of the agency permit. So overall, there's a regulatory permit to allow the site to be used. In order to comply with EA requirements and best practice, I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm talking out of turn. There is a two-step process. So soils need to be tested at source. If they're confirmed as acceptable, then they can be imported into the facility. They will then undergo a second test on acceptance, and the acceptance test is done independently. And if that's all well and good, there will be further tests during the process of that stock. But there is also a verification test, if I've used the right term, so that the actual treated soil at the end of the process and before it's deposited on the landfill as a restoration material also has to be suitable. That's it put in its simplest form. I don't know if Mr. Owens wants to correct me on any of that or add to that particular element on the first part of your question.
Yeah, we actually physically visit most of the sites with the soil on to look at the physical nature as well as any history and the contamination. So to make sure really our testing regime is robust. So we tend to sample too much to make sure we're not taking on a liability, and then it's tested again as soon as it comes into site, because we need to validate that what's been excavated and sent to us is the same material that we tested at the start. And again, as you said, it goes through several rounds of testing, and then the final testing will also include leachate testing and other forms of testing to ensure that once it's placed into the restoration scheme, there's no potential for contamination to leach out in the future and say enter any surface water or controlled waters features. So it's very, very robust, and it fits with all the latest EA guidance on sampling frequencies and forms of testing.
Thank you for that. The second element is how the residents become assured. Now, there are elements there in environmental operational terms. We have, as a consequence of the pre-existing planning permission and application, that was subject to an EIA. Within the content of that, then obviously issues of operational impact of a landfill on local communities was a relevant consideration, to which then systems of operation were put in place. So there is a dust management plan, there is a dust complaint procedure, there is an odour complaint protocol, etc. And they are also covered by the permit for the existing landfill arrangements. Similar would apply in this case. So one might have to consider that although this is a separate entity insofar as it is a soil treatment facility, it is still within the confines of an existing landfill site. So both are subject to their own permits, so there must be some consistency in the way that the sites are operated. So strictly in environmental terms, whether that is through the pollution prevention, and pollution prevention can include groundwater, surface water, odour, dust management, noise. We feel that they are, as officers, sufficient regulatory provisions in place to control that already, and that this site utilises some of that existing infrastructure which is already on the site. So it's not an entirely new proposal, it's the use to which the land be put temporarily. So that gives rise to the officer recommendation to impose similar operational conditions that are already in place for the existing landfill site. We do not feel that in the cumulative there will be any additional burden in terms of environmental impacts as a consequence of operating such a small facility within the landfill. I don't know if John wants to come back on that particular point before I move on to the rats element of the question.
You've covered everything. Sorry.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Jones? Can Ian now carry on with the next stage?
Yes, that's fine. I'm very comfortable with the responses that I've received, so thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Ian, do you want to carry on with the next stage?
Okay, thank you. The third element was really the rats objection. So Residents Against Toxic scheme, they have put in a very comprehensive objection to the scheme. It is similar to the objection that was received in the previous application for the revisions to the landfill site, restoration and profile. So some of those objections do not have sufficient weight in the officer's opinion to carry or to weigh in the balance to carry towards a refusal of this application. That's partly because they relate to matters which are not relevant to the operation of the landfill site. So other sites which have been granted planning permission within the Normanton area, they've been granted on their own individual planning merits. So they don't have any direct consequence for this proposal. There are lots of historical references which were previously considered. Over the years, there have been a number of operational matters which have been drawn to our attention as a planning authority, and also to the attention of the Environment Agency. They've been looked at and investigated separately, and we have our respective responsibilities, areas for responsibility. Separately, the council is also the landowner, so there is a direct issue of landowner and tenant relationship. In terms of the previous historical problems which have been suggested by the rats objection, there's no contention that we haven't had those complaints, but we feel that they've been dealt with at that time by whichever authority to which they came. The issues of the relationship between the applicant and the landlord is not a planning consideration. Neither is the content or the referral to elements of the lease. I must make it quite plain that the planning authority is not party to the lease, and those matters would normally be outside of any planning consideration. So that point is made, I think, in the report in relation to the rats objection. Any other matters regarding the future use of the land are really for, and if they involve development particularly, therefore the council, both as landowner and as a planning authority, to which there was a planning committee responsibility, but those elements are not before you today, and they have no bearing on this application at all. So there is not, by reference to any historical or other reason, to suggest that there is any problem in granting a planning permission for a 5-year temporary use of the land within the existing landfill site. So I believe that's where I would put the rats objection, with the greatest respect to all members of rats and to the president of rats.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any further questions to the applicants or the officer? No. then I will then go to the vote. I will ask Claire to vote. The officer's recommendation is for approval. I will now go to Frances. So if you would like to put your videos and microphones back on, please, then Frances will take the vote. I will take note that Councillor Harvey has asked permission and has left the meeting, so there is one less. Over to you, Frances.
Chair,
You want to propose and second, Chair? Sorry about that.
Chair,
I'm just waiting till Frances makes sure we've got everybody on, then I will reiterate.
Chair, you've got my video switched off. Somebody else has switched my video off. I imagine it's some central point. That's it, thank you.
So we've got you back on, Stuart. So we're all now back on. Right, the officer's recommendation, therefore, is for approval. Do I have that moved?
I'll move, Chair.
Seconded?
I'll second it.
Thank you. And then we will go to the vote. Frances, it's over to you to take the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll ask each councillor for their vote in turn. Can I please start with Councillor Blezard?
For.
Councillor Ellis, please.
For.
Councillor Hepworth.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Scott.
For.
Councillor Swift.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Tennant-King.
For.
Councillor Whitehouse.
For.
Councillor Heptonstall.
For.
And Councillor Pickin.
For.
Okay, Chair, I can confirm that there were 11 votes in favour, there were no votes against, and there were no abstentions.
Thank you, Frances.
Okay.
That is then recommended for approval. Can I, with conditions attached that Ian has already put on. Can I ask now that this meeting is now taken off, please? Gregor?